All right, welcome Vikings. This is a tutorial on the Your Culture in Color project. We're going to talk about the assignment details. We're going to talk about finding and saving a coloring page. We're going to go to photopea.com and we're going to open up that coloring page image. We're going to set up some layers for coloring. Then we're going to use a magic wand selection tool to be able to select certain areas of your coloring page. Then we're going to use the paint bucket fill tool to actually fill in color. And lastly, we're going to use dodge and burn shading tools to be able to actually make some dimension on those colors. And lastly, we're going to save and export the project so that way you can submit it to Schoology. All right, let's get into it. So first things first, what is the project? You have to use at least 7 different shades of color. You're going to turn in the original coloring page without any color. That is something that looks kind of like this. Then we're going to create a layer that looks something like this, maybe without the background gradient here. I added that as a background layer. But you're basically just going to fill in, you're going to select certain areas of your coloring page, and you're going to fill it with the paint bucket tool. And then you're going to use the dodge and burn tools to add a little bit of dimension. Yes. That's what you'll do. You'll use the dodge and burn tools to be able to create a little bit more interesting shading detail. Basically allows you to color way better than you would if you were to use just regular paint bucket tools. All right, that's the basics of what we're going to do. Let's get right into how we do this. The first thing we got to do is we got to find a coloring page. So to do that, you can simply go to Google like this and search for something like Mexican coloring pages. And if you do that, and then you go to the images section in Google, you'll get all these different things that you could potentially use. Let's say I don't want to do that. Let's say I want to go somewhere else. I want to do, you will need to use a pre-made coloring page for this. I would suggest that because it has to do with your culture. Now, if you want to, you could draw something that comes from your culture. And as an exercise, you could use this. You can make your own coloring page, and you could do this. However, I'm not going to expect that out of everybody. I'm just going to say that you need to have a coloring page that's black and white, and you can choose to make it yourself. But I would say you could also very easily just find one and use that. So let's see. I'm gonna go to Chichen Itza because that's where my. Actually, you know what? I've already done so many of these. I'm gonna do a Celtic one instead. There we go. All right, so this is the other side of my family is all about Celtic art. And so that's what I'm going to use. Let me see if I can find something interesting. There's all kinds of cool ones here. So when you go into searching for this, you want to click on the image first. These are all thumbnails, so you don't want to save and use these ones. You want to click on one of the images, and then you want to check over here what the this is a blown up actual image. These are all thumbnails, so you don't want to use these images. You want to click on the image, and then you're going to see a blown up version of the image that pops up. This is the image that you want to use. And before you actually use it, you want to go over here and check to see, hey, what is the resolution of this image? Because it could be that you're working with an image that's really tiny and it's going to look really bad when you try to fill it in. So you want to make sure that whatever image you use has a decent resolution, something of at least 800 by 800, something like that. You want to probably have at least 1,000 by 1,000 when you start. This is a pretty good image. I like this one, so this is what I'm going to use. Although the Tree of Life looks pretty good too. This would be a cool one to work on too. I think I'm still going to go with this because this just looks cool to me. All right, so I'm going to take this coloring page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the coloring page, and I'm going to go down to where it says Save Image As. You're going to see this right here. There we go, Save Image As. So I'm going to click on that Save Image As. And when I click on that, you'll see a dialog box that says, where do you want to save this? And I'm going to save it in my downloads folder. Pretty simple. If you're on a Chromebook, you don't have much of an option. It's going to save it in your folder. However, I am going to rename it. I'm going to call this Celtic Coloring Page BW. And the reason I put BW is because I know that this is black and white. How do you download on Chromebooks? You should be able to just right-click on this and go down to Save Image As. And it should show up as something that downloads to your downloads folder. So after you've done that, you've found your coloring page. We are now going to go to Photopea.com. Let's check out once again what our steps are. We've found and saved the coloring page. Now we're going to go to Photopea.com, and that's right here. I would like to call it Photopea, but that's not what the originator, what the person who made this site calls it. So I'm going to be respectful and call their child the name that they actually called it. All right, so let's go to Photopea.com. All right, here we are. This is a site that was actually designed by one person, by the way. Pretty awesome. And they support this site, which is basically a free version of Photoshop that can be run just in any web browser, including your Chromebooks, without any installation. They've run this thing with ads, so I'm sorry. There's some stuff for ads over here on the side. Just ignore them. You can also, if you don't like those ads and you want to give the guy who made this some money, you can make an account, which gives you no ads, gives you more steps in your history, and you could buy it for a certain amount of time if you want, or you could just use it for free, which is what's happening now. It is almost exactly like Photoshop. Like most of the tools are called the same thing. The way that it's laid out is the same. The guy basically recreated Photoshop, but Photoshop doesn't have a patent on editing videos or editing images in any way. They just have their own code, and he rewrote all the code by himself. So very cool, very awesome guy for doing this. Otherwise, working on Chromebooks and doing any kind of image manipulation would be almost impossible because we wouldn't be able to install stuff. So thank you. I don't remember what your name is. Let's talk about how we get the tool in here. So first we go up here to File. We go to Open, and we're going to navigate to that downloaded picture in your Downloads folder. You should see the coloring page right here. So we open it up. Bam, here it is. All right. Now the first thing you got to know is this is a coloring page, and it's very cool. And it shows up over here as a layer, and we want to add another layer. If you recall, yes, food culture is a thing. Pick a food if you'd like from your culture. You can pick over here on this nice layer, this little thing that looks like a page being turned up. You click on that, and that creates a new layer. And we're going to call this the color layer. So I'm going to double click on the name of it. I'm going to call it color. Here we go. You can see that it is actually, it's transparent. That is, it's see-through because we can see this checkerboard pattern right here, this gray and white checkerboard pattern. That means that it's invisible, that you can see right through it, like it's one of those transparency sheets that we were talking about earlier. Now, the other thing that we want to do is we want to take our background layer and we want to duplicate this. So to duplicate this, you can right-click on this, and you can go over here to where it says Duplicate Layer, and we're just going to duplicate this. And I'm going to rename the duplicate layer, and I'm going to call this Top Lines. Basically, I'm going to put these lines on top of my color lines here. Now, first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we can do some color here. What we did last time when we made our projects before was we used the brush tool. We selected a color that we wanted to use. Once again, the brush tool is over here. You can also press the B key to be able to activate the brush tool. If you click on one of these tools over here and hold down the mouse, you'll see all the different tools that are underneath that type of tool. Alternatively, if there's multiple tools, like in this case, there's a lot of different brush tools, you can press the B key on your keyboard, and every time you do that, it will cycle through the different tools in that menu. Very useful. We're going to be using that very soon, actually. Now, with the brush tool, we can go over here and pick a color. These are our colors down here. The foreground color is on top. The background color is on the bottom. We only really need the foreground color for what we're doing today. So we can click on this top box that's underneath the magnifying glass to choose our color. And then in there, we can choose which color of the rainbow we want to use and what hue of that rainbow color that we would like to pick. So there we go. I'm going to pick that. That's pretty good. Or what shade, I'm sorry, the shade of the hue that we want to use. I'm kind of into like vaporwave art and stuff, so I'm going to pick stuff that's like light blues and light purples and stuff like that. So there we go. I picked that color. Now, if my color layer is on top of the other layers, when I draw this, you're going to see, oh no, it goes right over the top of my lines, and it's not going to work very well. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take this layer, the top lines layer, because we made a duplicate here. We're going to take this and draw it. We're going to pull it on top of that color layer. Or alternatively, you can take the color layer and put it below the top lines layer. And oh, whoa, what happened? My color's gone. Well, the reason is your coloring page right here is not transparent. If we look at the layer that we have here, if we look at it kind of closely, we can see it doesn't have any of this cool checkerboard pattern. Really, it's made out of white and black. So what we need to do is we need to change the blending mode of this layer. And the blending mode of the layer is going to be up here, above where it says the layer type. So you're going to see right here it says normal. I'm going to click on that and change it to multiply. These, they're all kind of categorized. There's darkening ones, there's lightening ones, there's overlay ones, there's difference ones, and then there's special ones at the very bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick the multiply layer right here, which means that the black of these, the black area here is going to multiply all the layers below it, which basically means if we look at our layer now, there we go. It means that I can't draw over the black lines. If I color on my color layer, no matter what I color, it's going to be behind those black lines, which is really useful for doing any kind of color. Another interesting thing about this is if I wanted to edit my color, or if I wanted to move it with my move tool, for example, when I move it, you're going to see that it is totally separate from the layer behind it. So it really lets me have a lot of influence on how I'm going to do my coloring. All right, perfect. I'm actually going to take this color out of here. I'm going to delete that stuff. Oops, I don't want to delete the layer. I just want to erase it. So I'm going to just select everything on this layer by pressing Control A, and then I can delete the stuff in that layer by pressing Delete. Now, you won't often do this as far as selecting all. You might do this occasionally. Also, if you want to deselect things, you can press Control D to deselect an area. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Let's just say I have my coloring layers here with my top lines. The first thing that you want to do is you want to put your you want to duplicate this layer or just place it on top of your other layer and then turn it into multiply mode. That's usually the easiest way to make sure that your top lines don't get erased. All right, so now that we have this part ready, let's check out what the next step is. So we've talked about going to Photopea, sorry. We talked about opening the color page image and setting up the layers. Now we're going to talk about the Magic Wand selection tool. All right, let's talk about the Magic Wand. So the Magic Wand is a tool over here on the left-hand side. You're going to see a tool up here that looks like a little jelly bean. A little jelly bean with this like dotted line around the sides of it. And this is to get into your selection tools. There's different selection tools. There's the marquee tools, there's the lasso tools, and these are the more advanced selection tools. And if we click on this and hold down the mouse button, or in your case the trackpad, you'll see that there are different selections. There's the object selection, which is good for taking characters off of a white background. There's the quick selection tool, which is good for filling in a certain area. And then there's the Magic Wand, which is what we're going to use because we can affect tolerance levels really well. Also, you'll see that the special hotkey for this is the key W. So if I press W on the keyboard repeatedly, you'll see that it will cycle through those different tools that I have. Very cool. All right. So before we begin using the Magic Wand, I want to first show you there's something that you're going to want to do to make this work really well. If I don't change anything, and if I just use my Magic Wand tool and I click on an area, and then I use like the brush. Oh, I know how to do this, McDowell. You don't have to teach me anything. I already know everything. As soon as you do that, when you deselect this, first of all, I wrote on my top lines layer, which you don't want to do. You want to select an area and you want to fill in your color layer. You want to keep them separate. But also, you'll notice that when I use my Magic Wand tool, if I take my color off, or if I deselect the area, you'll see there's all these white dots that I missed. There's all kinds of like little areas around the sides that I missed that it didn't fill in. And the way that we prevent that from happening is we need to change the tolerance of our Magic Wand tool. So if you look up here on the very top of the screen, you're going to see something that says tolerance. And some people have a lot of tolerance for other people. Some people don't have a lot of tolerance for other people. That's not what this is talking about. This is saying This is how close, when I click on a pixel on this magic wand tool, this is how close the colors next to it have to be in order for it to be selected as well. That's what tolerance means. How close of a color do I mean by tolerance? I'm going to put 200 because this picture, I can tell there's a bunch of like little, it was probably like a photocopy or something. And there's probably stuff that is like, probably artifacts that we have here that don't go in. So if I put 200, the more tolerance you have, the more accepting it will be. So when I actually click in here, when I click on my top lines layer and I click in this area, oh, that's too much tolerance. I can see it went way past where I want it to go. So I might want to bring this down a little bit. We'll say, well, what about 150? How does that work? There we go. So I go back in here. I'm going to deselect the area. Let me try clicking in here. Okay, that's pretty good. And if I look at where the dotted lines are, now it's going pretty far into the coloring lines, but it's not going to leave that white line around the outside of my line. So perfect. Now what's cool about this is you can select more than one area at a time. So let's say I want this to be a color, but I also want these areas over here to be the same color. I'm going to hold down Shift while I have my magic wand selected, and I can click on multiple areas. So let's say I want all this stuff right here. I want all this to be the same color. This and this and that and this and that and that, this and this, this and this and this and that. All right, cool. I like all that. I want all that to be the same color. I'm just going to stick with that for right now. So I held down Shift and I just clicked on different areas that I want those same things to be, or the same color areas that I want here. Now that I've selected all these areas, I'm going to go down to my color layer. So I don't want to color on my top lines. I want to color on the area down below. And this will make more sense why later, because when we add our shading, we don't want to shade these black lines. We only want to shade the color that we use. That's why we are going to make our color a separate layer here. So I'm now selecting my bottom layer, and now I'm going to use my paint bucket tool. And you're going to look over here on the side and say, hey, where's the paint bucket? I had a question like that earlier. Sorry about that. I didn't answer you right away because now here we are. It's going to be under the gradient. Sorry about the magnifier tool there. This gradient right here, if we click on that and hold down the mouse or the track your finger, you'll see that there is a gradient tool, but there's also the paint bucket tool. And the paint bucket tool, the shortcut for this is the letter G. So if I press G, I'll now be able to select my paint bucket tool. Now, just as we used before with our paintings, we're going to choose what color we want this to be. I'm going to make it this cool purple color, so that's cool. And now I just have to click in one of these areas, and voila. There we go. It's all been filled in, and that's how we can fill in a specific area. And once again, you can hold down Shift, and you can click on a bunch of different areas at once to get different looks. So once you have selected an area and you filled it all in, you can hold down Control and press D, or if you have your magic wand selected, you can right click and go to deselect. And that's how you can get those marching lines out of there so you can select a new area. Now remember, in order to select areas inside these lines, you actually have to pick the layer that has the lines. If I select an area, like if I select in the color area here and I click, you're going to get everything. If I press, if I filled this with the gradient tool or the fill tool, you'll see you're going to get everything. So you don't want to do that. When you're selecting areas, you first want to press Control D to deselect. Then you want to go back up to your top lines layer to be able to select areas. If you forget to go up to your top lines, you're going to fill in everything in your color area or your color layer. All the transparent stuff back here will be selected. So you got to make sure that you go back to your top lines here, and then you can select more areas. So I'm going to use my magic wand tool, and I'm going to pick these heads up here. Get those looking cool. I'll get the bottom faces here. That's pretty cool right there. And I think I'll also make it to where the lines down here will be the same color. There we go. Yep. All right. That's good. Might even do a little bit down below. Cool. I'm not going to do this whole thing for you. I'm just showing you can select multiple areas there. When you want to change the paint bucket color, you simply go over here and you click on that box. And then a little tip for you, a little color tip for you. If you want to keep the same shade, but you just want to change the color, just change the rainbow a little bit. But don't change where this bubble is. That'll give you the same general lighting. Now I'm going to go back to my color layer here, and I'm going to use the paint bucket tool and fill it. Bing! There we go. All set. Now I press Control D to deselect. I go back up to my top lines, and I continue the process until I have everything colored in the way I want it to be. Choose my magic wand tool. I'm going to choose this cool looking thing here. Get some of this stuff together. I'll make all this kind of the same color. There we go. I like that. That looks pretty good. All right. So let's say I got that stuff, and I want that to be, oh, don't forget this one. There we go. Then I'm going to go back to my color layer. I'm going to use my paint bucket tool. I'm going to choose my color. I want this to be like lighter, like a light blue. That's cool. All right. And fill it. There we go. All right. So after you do this for a little while, you spend a little time going in. Let me tell you a little bit about zooming tools, because zoom tools are helpful. If you hold down the space bar and you click and drag, this is the hand tool. So this is how you can move around. And if you zoom in on something, this is an easy way for you to move around. And then if you hold down Control while you're holding down space, this is how you can zoom in. So you can click to zoom in that way. And if you hold down Alt and the space bar, you can click to zoom out. Also on touch screens, you can tend to use the standard type of zooming functions, like using your fingers to be able to zoom in and zoom out as well. But that's a useful thing to know how to do, because a lot of times artists will zoom in and get real close on something, and then you'll move around by holding down the space bar as you click, so you can move around a painting. And then if you hold down Alt while you have that space bar depressed, then you can zoom in and zoom out pretty much at a whim. It's pretty good. Also, if you hold down Control and space, you can click and then just drag left and right, and that's another way for you to zoom in and out. So useful zooming tools. Very good to know how to do that, especially if you're doing any kind of work in images for extended period of time and anything that has detail. All right, let's check out what the last thing is here that we're going to do. Let's just say that I'm all done. I don't want to waste your time by completing this whole thing. After we've done our paint bucket fill, we're going to learn how to do dodge and burn shading. So to do that, we need to actually create another layer. We don't have to, but I would suggest you to do so. So let's check out how that's done. All right, so here we are. We have our paint stuff mostly filled in. I'm not going to do the whole thing because, once again, I don't want to just waste time. I've shown you the steps of what you do. Now let's talk about how we can actually make this thing look real good. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to select our color layer here, and we want to duplicate it. So I'm going to right-click on it, and I'm going to go to Duplicate Layer. Why do I want to do this? Because, well, let's say I make some mistakes on my shading and I just want to go back to how my color layer looks. It would be really easy to do if I remember to kind of make a copy of my color after I was done with it and then just worked on a different layer. So it's a good idea for you to get in the habit of doing this. Some people actually make multiple color layers too. When they do shading, they'll make a color layer for their darks, and then they'll make a color layer for their middle layers, and then they'll do a color layer for their highlights, their shadows, and their midtones. So there's different ways to do this. I just want you to get in the habit of making a copy. Whenever you're done with a layer, make a copy of it and edit that copy. There is a history that's installed and you can use, but it's better to make layer copies because it's easier to go and make just portion changes. So just take it as a hint now to get used to making a layer that copies over your color. Now I'm going to actually change the name of this so it's not just called color copy. If you double click on the name of a layer over here on the top, then it will allow you to change what its name is. And I'm going to call this one color shading. There we go. All right. So with the color shading, how do we do some color shading? Over here on the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to see something that looks kind of like a lollipop. Oh, lollipop. I love lollipops. This is actually the dodge tool. And if you click and hold on this, you're going to see that there's three different tools here. There's the dodge tool, the burn tool, and the sponge tool. The dodge tool lets you lighten things, kind of like if you left something out in the sun. If you had a really cool like hat or something, but you left it on your dashboard and it bleached it, that's what the dodge tool does. It bleaches things. The burn tool is kind of like if you used a magnifying glass to burn something into a piece of wood or something, it actually makes it darker. And lastly, the sponge tool takes the color saturation out of something. So it makes it more black and white. Like if you wanted to make just one area of your image look less color saturated, like it's duller, the sponge tool is a great way to do that. These are actually all old school photography techniques that people used to use in dark rooms. That's why they get the name that they have. If you knew somebody who's into photography into like the 70s and the 80s or something, or before that, they used these same tools, but they weren't as easy as what we have now, where we can just click on something or press O and suddenly we have the ability to. You'd actually have to sit in a dark room and like scrub at something with a sponge to use the sponge tool. So we got it easy. We can complain, but we got it easy. All right, so first thing that you want to do is you want to select the tool, which is over here. I'm going to use the dodge tool first. Then we're going to choose what we want our exposure to be. And when I say exposure, I don't mean like a creepy guy in a trench coat. I mean how effective is the tool? How powerful is the tool? If you go up here and you click on this, there's a little slider that lets you choose how powerful you want that tool to be. I would suggest just making it less powerful, like 25%, and using more brush strokes to make it lighter. So after we have the tool selected, it's just like the brush tool. So you want to right click. You want to make the size as large as you want. I'm going to use kind of a medium size like this. And then for hardness, I would suggest that when you do shading, you don't use a hard brush. You want to make it really light because otherwise you'll have these dark circles. Let me show you actually why. If I just click and I use this, you're going to actually see, if I zoom in on this, you're going to see kind of like these dark circles. You can actually see where the circles are. And we don't really want to do that. I mean, unless that's your style, unless that's what you want because that's the style, you don't typically want to do that. So what we want to do is we want to use a less hard brush. So I'm going to go over here to the hardness, and I'm going to bring that down. And now it's going to be much lighter. Don't worry if you're confused. There is going to be, you can watch this video at a later time, and it should explain everything. But let me just show you. We're selecting the dodge tool. We're changing the exposure, which is how powerful the tool is. If I made this really powerful, now when I click over this color, you'll see, oh, okay, it brightens it quite a bit. And if I just do some brush strokes over the top of this, you're going to see that it affects the way the color looks. It's kind of giving it dimension. I can see if I zoom in on this now that whatever I went over with my dodge tool, it's kind of making it lighter. Now the burn tool is the exact opposite. So if I went over here and I selected the burn tool, or I pressed O, then I would have a burn tool. Notice that the burn tool is a whole new tool, so I have to go back and I have to change the size, and I have to change the hardness, and it has its own exposure rating here. So that's stuff that you got to know. But then if I click in here, now I can make this stuff darker. All right, yeah. Now I can add some dimension in here, and I can make this stuff look kind of 3D. I can go in here and add a little bit there, a little bit here. Now let's say I didn't want to make it bleed over. Let's say I wanted to make it to where I wanted just to affect one area of this. All you got to do is use your magic wand tool, click in here. Now I have that color area selected in my color shading. Now I can simply use that burn tool, and it won't bleed over into the rest of the colors if I have other colors surrounding it. It's only going to select and shade that one area. Once again, I'm going to go back over here to my dodge tool. I'm going to make this area lighter. All right, cool. So now I have dimensionality. You can see here that there's a light area here. There's a dark area here. The color is all the same, but I have the ability to add shading in a very realistic way. Now, if you want to be realistic about it, you want to think about, in 3D modeling in particular, you'll typically have a light source coming from somewhere. So if I have my light over here in the top left, I can look down here, and I want to put all my light shading stuff coming from the top left, and I want all of my dark shading to be in the bottom right. So I'm going to kind of take that as a general rule when I'm shading this stuff. I'm going to try to make it to where anytime there's something that should have shading, I'm going to make that light from the top left. Kind of like this. There we go. And then anything that would have shadow would be from the bottom right. So this is something that you would typically want to do. You'd want to think about as far as light sources. But I'm not going to grade you really hard on that stuff. This is like an intro class, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, McDowell is like giving me, he wants it to be perfect, so I got to spend, tons of time. If you want to be an artist, if you want to be good at this, you get what you get out of it. Like if you spend a lot of time, you'll be better than you would if you didn't. But I understand you've got a bunch of different things to do in school. This isn't your only class. I understand that. So don't think that I'm going to be like a total hardliner. I just want to see you put effort in this and express who you are with your culture, what you're about, the kind of things that you like. Once again, I'm not going to judge you based off of being a good artist. I'm going to judge you based off of seeing that you paid attention and understand what some of the tools are. And also just you expressing who you are. All right, so there you go. I put some dodging in there. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to change to the burn tool. I'm going to add some dark areas here. There we go. I'm going to put that in there. That's cool. Maybe some of these areas where I want it to seem like it's going underneath another area here, I'll put like a dark shadow so it looks like, oh, okay, this is on top of that one. Okay, I see kind of what he's doing here. There we go. It looks like now there's a shadow going across the top of these. That's kind of what you could do. There's different ways that you could go about completing this, but I'm just showing you a baseline of what the dodge and burn tools are capable of. There we go. I'll put these in here. A little bit of shadow. That's cool. All right. That looks good. All right. So once again, I don't want to waste your time showing you, the artistry that goes about with this is typically you spending time and having attention to detail. You can switch between your dodge and burn tools by pressing O on the keyboard, so it lets you go between them very quickly. There we go. That looks pretty good. All right, so if this thing were totally colored in, that's kind of what you get out of it. Now, why did we make a separate duplicate layer? Well, because I can now click on the hide button right here in my color shading, and you can see, oh, okay, that's what I did with the color shade. I can see what the difference is. And if you wanted to select one color and do something special with just that one area, it's easy for you to do if you have another color area here. There's also a lot of things that you can do with color blending as long as you keep them in separate layers. So let me just say that it's important for you to be able to have multiple color layers because it will make a difference for your for what you can do as far as options in the future. I'm not just showing you this so that way you can just make coloring pages. If you're an artist and you're serious about doing 3D modeling and stuff, this will help you for a lot more than just this one project. But knowing how to color with selection tools is really helpful for all kinds of artistic things. So that's pretty much it. Let's check out the last thing that we got to do. So we talked about the paint bucket fill. We talked about dodge and burn shading. Now we're going to talk about saving and exporting our project. All right, so we're all done. Let's just say this is all done. I know that it's not all done. Clearly, I missed some spots here. Go. So what do we do here? How do we save this thing and turn it in for credit? That's why we're here, right? It's not to become better artists. It's just to get that point value. So we're going to go up here to where it says File, and you're going to go down to where it says Save as PSD. PSD is important to save as. Why? It's a Photoshop document. Pros, it saves all of the layer information. So if you wanted to come back and you wanted to, I only had an hour to work on it, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to work on it more later. If you don't save it as a PSD, all these layers are going to disappear. So make sure that you save it as a PSD first. The cons with the PSD, it can only be opened in software that recognizes PSDs. So stuff like Photopea and Photoshop could open it fine, and GIMP and other image manipulation softwares. However, if you were to try to just open it in a web browser, it would say, hey, I don't know how this looks. I don't even know that it's an image file. So you just keep that in mind. You want to keep a copy as a PSD. And you also want to go in and go File, Export As, and you want to export it as a JPEG. And when you do that, this is a picture that anybody could see on a web browser, as long as they had a computer that had a web browser. Now, when you save it as a JPEG, you also want to up the quality. So drag this slider right here all the way up to 100%. Anything that you do, you don't want to compress it when you first make it. You want to have a full quality version of it, and then you can choose to compress it should you want to. And we'll talk about compression and what it does for those of you who don't know. But just know that you want to have your quality at 100% when you save an original version of something. Now we're going to click on Save. And we have a JPEG, which is actually already a compressed format. And we have the PSD, which is the perfect format. And that's what we want to keep, a lossless quality image as well. All right, now that we have those two JPEG images, or we have those two images, we want to go down and click on the little arrow here, and we want to check them out in the folder. We want to show them in the folder because we want to rename them. This one is the black and white image, and we want to keep that one called BW. But these other ones we actually colored. So I'm going to press, I'm going to right-click and go to Rename. On a Windows device, you can press F2, but if you're on a Chromebook, I don't actually know exactly what that would be. So you can just click on it, and you can rename it. And I'm going to call this Colored. There we go. And as far as the PSD goes, I'm going to do the same thing. Rename it. And I'm going to change this to BW to Colored. There we go. And you're going to submit all three of these documents. You'll submit the black and white, the version that has no color on it. I want to see that you didn't just find an image and say, yeah, I colored this, McDowell. Yeah, this was a coloring page. No, I want to see that you had it originally as a coloring page. And then I want to see your colored version of it. And then I want to see that you also have your version that has layers, your PSD. And that's it. Once you have those three documents, you're going to turn these into Schoology. How do you do that? Well, let's go and check it out. I don't want to leave you hanging on anything here. You go to our Schoology. Whoa! You go to our Schoology page here. You go to the submission here. You click on the little. There's a little button here that'll say Submit Assignment. You click on that, and then you click on what looks like a little file. Right next to the microphone, to the left of the microphone, there's a little thing that looks like a file. You click on that, and then you're going to submit your blank coloring page version, and your fully colored version, and your PSD. And that's how you'll get full credit for this assignment. When we come into class next Wednesday, you're going to present it. So you're going to show it off, and it should be pretty cool to see what everybody comes up with. I hope you have fun with this project. How do you get the PSD image? Once again, you go over here to File, and you go down to where it says Save as PSD. All right, everybody, I hope you have fun with this. Until I communicate with you again, keep on learning and keep that art alive.